scheduled visit for the IAEA inspectors. Is that part of your agreement?
They're wrong.
So,
They're wrong. They know they're wrong. They told us inside, and we have it down 100% inspection. And if they were right, I'd cancel the meetings right now.
and Iran says they're still agreement to buy ag
From your
products.
view, Mr. President, when will those inspectors actually be on the ground?
At the appropriate time. At the appropriate time. There's no rush, but they'll be on the ground at the appropriate time.
Mr. President, on the reflecting pool, Israeli forces have opened fire in southern Lebanon today, killing 2 people. Are you confident that the ceasefire is still holding?
Well, we'll see what that. Look, they've been fighting each other for many, many years, decades, and we'll see. But it's going to come along.
Mr. President, on Nancy Guthrie, there's a note that our Brian Ensign reported on that says that she's dead, she's with nature. Is there any hope that the FBI and investigators find her?
I hope they find her. I mean, Savannah's gone through a rough. That family's gone through hell, but I hope they find her.
Mr. President, reflecting pool, you mentioned yesterday that the Interior Department has video and photos. We reached out to them and they haven't shared it with us. Are you going to compel them to release
They've
it?
arrested, I think, 6 people on the reflecting pool. So the reflecting pool looks fantastic. I just got pictures of it. It's beautiful. But somebody went in with a knife and cut it. They cut it up good. And then they cut a 200, 350-foot slip in the form of lots of little slips, real horrible stuff, and they destroyed the grass. We put a brand new big load of grass out there, and they destroyed it. So it's all being fixed, but it's a shame. So I understand 5 or 6 people are arrested. The Interior Department can refer to you on that. And I hear they have 6 people under investigation.
Mr. President, you're about to speak to truckers. Truckers are at high risk of losing their jobs to AI because of
Well, now
self-driving
they're not.
vehicles.
You can't get a job. Right now we have the highest job numbers we've ever had in the country, in the history of the country. And I'm just with a couple of the great senators and congressmen. We're talking, it's actually hard to fill the job. You know, nobody's ever seen a time like this. We have right now so many jobs that are going to be available. And the biggest problem we have is getting the people. So we're really doing spectacular. In this area in Pennsylvania, for steel, Eli Lilly just announced billions of dollars worth of plants. We have more plants being built right now in the United States than at any time in the history of our country.
Mr. President, when you meet with senators tomorrow, what will you say to allies of yours like Senator Cruz who've been critical of the Iran deal?
Well, I think anybody that's been critical of it has to be educated, even if they're friends of mine, because we have Iran in a position that nobody's ever had. This should have been done for 47 years by other presidents, and we have Iran in a position where their military has been totally wiped out, their leadership has been wiped out, their radar has been wiped out, everything's been wiped out. They have not a good negotiating position, but despite that, and money that will be taken out of Iran is going to go to our farmers to give corn, soybeans, wheat to Iran, because they have a hunger problem, they have a food problem, they have a medicine problem, they got a lot of problems, and they have an inflation. Their inflation now just at 300%. So they have a lot of problems.
Mr. President, are you planning to do a federal takeover of D.C. soon, since it looks likely that a socialist needs to...
So we have a radical left communist elected, I guess, soon to be elected mayor of D.C. D.C. is now a safe, you people know better than anybody, it's a safe, beautiful city. When I came here, it was an unsafe, unkempt, horrible city. It was horrible. The monuments and the waterfalls and the statues and everything were graffiti written, hadn't been fixed in 50 years, clean. Now it's beautiful. We did 52 statues, monuments, waterfalls, including the thing that, you know, where the vandals hit the reflecting pool, but we'll get that very quickly. In fact, I will say, this morning I sent people over, they say it looks absolutely beautiful. But we're going to have to let a little water out and fix it, and then we'll put the water back in.
On ODNI.
But just so you understand, so our country is doing really well, and we're going to keep it that way. And any senator that didn't vote for all of the things we need, because we're making an amazing deal with Iran. We're making a deal that's going to keep our country and the world safe, because we're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon, and they know that, and they agree to that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the U.S. President Donald Trump making remarks at Mack Trucks factory in Pennsylvania. But now we go back with the latest economic headlines. I'll hand you over to my colleague Ronald Assas for the top stories. What do you have for us, Rana?
Thank you so much, Henny. We have plenty of news and developments from all around the world. We start off with Europe, where European Central Bank Chief Economist Philippe Lane has stated that Eurozone inflation could remain above the ECB's 2% target for some time, even if peace in the Middle East holds. Though he stressed the shock still warrants only a measured policy response. Lane said inflation could stay above target into the first half of 2027 after rising above 3% last month. He noted recent progress in easing Middle East tensions, but warned that uncertainty remains high and risks keep inflation elevated for longer. He added that while higher energy prices may weigh on growth, the impact should be limited due to a strong labour market, AI investment and continued public spending on defence and infrastructure. In the United Kingdom, the Confederation of British Industry (CBI) has reported that UK manufacturing orders fell at their fastest pace since September 2022 during the COVID-19 pandemic, with little sign of relief despite easing geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Its monthly order book balance dropped to 45 in June from 41 in May, marking the weakest level since 2022. Expectations for output over the next 3 months also fell to their lowest since December 2024. CBI senior economist Cameron Martin said manufacturers were facing an increasingly difficult trading environment, with orders books at their weakest since 2020 and output continuing to decline. He added that reopening the Strait of Hormuz would help ease pressure on British industry. The survey also showed price pressures easing for manufacturers, although they remain alleviated. Moving on to North America, where Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem has stated that the latest inflation data showed price pressures were largely concentrated in energy, especially oil, while noting that food inflation remains a concern. He said the recent rise in inflation is very concentrated in oil prices and added that there is no evidence of broad-based or generalized inflation in the economy. Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak has stated that Russia is considering a complete ban on diesel exports and other measures to help stabilize the domestic fuel market, adding that the situation was not simple but remained under control. Novak noted that oil companies had ramped up fuel production to maximum levels and that Russia was capable of dealing with the current challenges. He also said the government had put forward tax proposals as part of efforts to support the sector following Ukrainian strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development (EBRD) Vice President Matthew Patron has announced that the bank plans to sign more than this week. He said the EBRD remains focused on Ukraine's energy sector, including agreements for 2 wind power projects, a 198 megawatt facility and a 120 megawatt project run by Germany's Notus Energy. The bank also plans to sign around 270 million euros in financing agreements with 7 Ukrainian banks. Patron added that the EBRD EU and World Bank are establishing a mechanism to provide price stability for independent power producers aimed at unlocking up to 1.5 gigawatt of renewable energy investment in Ukraine. Moving on to the world of commodities, where oil prices were broadly steady on Tuesday, slipping about 1% as investors kept a close watch on crude flows through the Strait of Hormuz, following signs of progress in U.S.-Iran peace talks. Brent crude futures were down 1.1% at $77.03 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate fell 73 cents at 1% at $73.13 a barrel, after earlier dropping to a near four-month low of $72.48. Deutsche Bank has cut its gold price forecast by as much as 22%, citing uncertainty over U.S. monetary policy and weakening investment demand. The bank now expects gold to average 4,300 ounces per dollar in the third quarter, before rising to $4,800 an ounce in the fourth quarter. Both forecasts remain above the current price of around $4,150 per ounce. He added that continued outflows from gold-backed exchange-traded funds have removed a key source of support for prices. The bank noted that if the Federal Reserve delivers 3 to 4 rate hikes, gold could fall to about $3,800 per ounce. However, it said central bank buying remains a strong and stabilizing demand factor. Gold prices fell on Tuesday as the United States dollar hit a one-year high on increased expectations of a Federal Reserve rate hike, outweighing support from softer oil prices amidst progress in U.S.-Iran talks. Spot gold dipped 1.2% to $4,138.79 per ounce. U.S. gold futures fell. August delivery fell 1.4% to $4,156.40 per ounce. The U.S. dollar rose to its highest level in more than a year on Tuesday, making gold more expensive for overseas buyers. Among other metals, spot silver fell 4.6% to $62.15 per ounce. In markets, global shares showed total decline across all indices during Tuesday's session. In the United States, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 0.90%, while the Nasdaq futures lost 1.46% and S&P 500 declined 0.98%. In Europe, the UK's FTSE 100 slipped 0.09%, Germany's DAX was down 0.98%, and France's CAC 40 sank 0.71%. Across Asia, Japan's Nikkei slid 3.55%, the Shanghai SSE Composite contracted 1.37%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index dropped 1.82%. Those were the economic top stories for the hour, and now we move on and return to my dear colleague Hani Saif in the studios. Hani.
Thank you, Rana. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for more in-depth analysis. Now, Brexit, 10 years after the referendum, remains one of the most significant economic shifts in modern UK history. While it did not cause an immediate shock, analysis suggests it has reshaped the economy in a slower, structural way, affecting growth, investment, trade and productivity. Now, many economists now see it less as a one-off event and more as a persistent drag on Britain's economic trajectory. Let's take a closer look. The Centre for European Reform reported that Brexit has weighed on UK investment and economic growth, with business investment estimated to be between 12 and 18% lower by 2025 than it would otherwise have been. The report said years of uncertainty, supply chain adjustments and higher trade costs prompted many firms to scale back expansion plans after Britain's departure from the European Union. It also found that Brexit reduced the number of EU-born workers in the UK, although increased migration from outside the EU offset the decline. According to the Centre, the combined impact of weaker trade, lower investment and slower productivity growth has left the British economy smaller than it would likely have been had the country remained in the EU. In the same vein, the Centre for European Reform has described Brexit as one of the starkest natural experiments in modern economics, saying Britain deliberately moved away from one of the world's largest markets after more than 4 decades of deep integration. It estimated that UK exports to the EU are around 12% lower and imports 16% lower than they would have been had Britain remained in the bloc. Goods exports are about 16% below projected levels, while services exports are around 7% lower than within the single market. Researchers said most of the losses stem from Britain's exit from the EU single market, which ended the regulatory alignment that previously enabled largely friction-free trade with European partners. For more on this, we're joined from London by the CEO of QW Capital, Mr. Gianluca Lobefalo. Mr. Lobefalo, welcome to Q News. Now, 10 years on, to what extent do you feel can Brexit be seen as a persistent, as they mentioned, drag on the UK's growth path, rather than a one-off economic shock?
Yes, so basically, first of all, it's clear that we're on the 10th anniversary since the June 2016 referendum, but in reality, the Brexit itself was effective on the 31st of January 2020. So we basically 6 years. But anyway, the logic, the analysis stays the same. It's true, I agree that in reality, the export and import versus Europe will still represent 41% of import and 50% of export for UK. So it's still the biggest partner. Estimation claim that they lost between 10 and 12%. In terms of drag on GDP, as you mentioned before, their estimation between 2 and 4%, other 6 and 8%. Obviously, it's super difficult to have a counter fact of this because we don't have the case. We can extrapolate what would have been if they were staying in Europe. But what is clearly happening is that we are seeing, and I quote Tony Blair yesterday, commenting on the new leadership of the Labour Party. So a new prime minister will eventually replace Keir Starmer in September. This is the seventh prime minister in the 10 years that we talk about. And as you can see, we had the same instability both during Tories leadership and Labour's leadership. So unfortunately, it's a negative bipartisan problem. There was not common in the UK.
So do you think that Brexit is actually responsible? I mean, did it contribute to the UK's unusually rapid turnover of prime ministers by intensifying the political fragmentation, the policy uncertainty, the economic burden on the British people?
Is definitely contributing. What Tory Blair was saying is that people are concentrated too much on politics and not on policy. So the problem is that we are not seeing any major difference among these 7 different prime ministers. They are all failing on main policy. And that's concerning. So we are talking about always new leadership within 2 different parties. But I live in the UK. I haven't seen any major change, Frank, in terms of policy. Bear in mind that if we look at the bigger picture, so even going much earlier than Brexit, so when UK joined the European Union under Margaret Thatcher, we had the period in which the UK was bankrupted, basically. It required a bailout by the IMF, even if it was not called bailout at the time, and people don't like to remember, but they didn't have enough money to pay interest expense. So they were bailed out by the IMF. They repaid the debt in 79. But in 1982, that was the peak of inflation in the UK and globally, and a peak of obviously of interest rate, we had basically the UK just came out of a bailout program of the IMF. And then in few years, until 2021, it became during that window the 4th most important country in G4. So can you imagine from almost bankrupted to become one of the major countries in the world? And then we had this, what happened during the period? When interest rate went down double digit, almost 20%, to basically flat and zero after the great financial crisis. Then it was enough to have 6 months until November 22 of expected increase of rates because of the inflation, that the UK pension system was virtually bankrupted in November. And they need an emergency plan by the Bank of England not to fail, the pension fund. So the problem is that the UK has been a poster child of this financialization, of this incredible leverage through the city and through the financial market. And then as soon as rates started to go on the other direction, after they've been from 1982 to 2021, you're talking about 39 years of downtrend, more or less. It's been enough to have a 6-month kind of priced in increase rate. The pension system was belly up.
Yes, well, a lot of people are, a lot of analysts are saying that this reminds them, it's a deja vu of the Thatcher years, but not quite. So how has Brexit fundamentally even changed the UK's relationship with the European Union, or mainly created a more costly form of economic separation?
Yeah, to me, the real problem is that Brexit was an excuse. Brexit was a symptom of no well-being, of many years of defunded, for example, the police, defunded the NHS. This was even during Blair. The second term of Blair was not really very good for the UK finance. So basically, the Brexit was a way to identify the problem mostly through immigration. That was, in theory, the problem of the UK. And then it came out that actually the immigration for Europe was a kind of profitable, quality immigration versus the one that replaced this one. They were much less effective for the UK economy, for the service industry in the UK, and for the education system in the UK. So the universities suffer a lot. So they didn't really tackle the problem. The problem was internal, and they haven't tackled it. So that's why Brexit or no Brexit, we have a continuous change of prime minister with no policy, with no solution. So it was the easy scapegoat. You know, sometimes when a country has a problem, it's easier to identify the problem abroad. So it was not, let's look at our own issue, at our own pocket. That is because of Europe. That was the closest ally. And it's because there are people coming from Europe and they're taking the job from British people. That was not the case, because this job, the British people didn't want to do it, and still didn't want to do it, but it has to be done. So if you're a restaurant and now have to close down, You have hotel in the countryside who cannot have personnel to cover for 7-day shift.
So do you think that the UK-EU trade flows were actually going down regardless Brexit took place or not?
No, what I'm saying is that the problem in the UK were much bigger than Brexit, but before Brexit, but the immigration from Europe at least was offsetting part of the problem because it was a quality immigration, was sustained a big part of the economy in the UK was a service economy. And then Brexit just make it worse. One part that was working. So when things went belly up in 2022, they didn't even have the positive offsetting effect that was coming from European immigration. So the reality was that they found a scapegoat that was the wrong one. Very likely, the problem would have been there even staying in Europe, but at least the European Union membership was allowing to have a quality immigration. Then there is the other side, the dark side of Brexit that not many people like to talk about. There was a big part of the city was in favor of Brexit, not because of immigration, but because they didn't want to have control by Brussels on regulation. You know that with Basel III, there's been much more prudential regulation on financial market that is actually making Europe more robust versus other economy. And the part of the city didn't want that because they were very happy to have this extremely flexible arrangement. But that has been the reason why now the UK market is extremely fragile. And unfortunately for the UK, there's been some other places like Dubai or Singapore who actually took over that business. You remember at the time they were talking about the fact that they wanted to, this part of the financial market wanted to transform London in Singapore on Thames.
Yes.
Basically, and that's failed because Dubai came out. So, and there was I call it the dark side because this guy wanted to have the dark money, the dodgy money, the money that people like me don't want, right? But they were counting in the decision. It was nothing to do with immigration. So these things didn't, thank God, let's put it this way, didn't materialize. The immigration from Europe was a good thing, and now they lost it. And there is the same problem that were before that basically has been identified as, European Union, but they had nothing to do with European Union, where internal weakness that are still there. And that's the reason why they almost went bankrupt in 2022. And they keep changing prime minister without a new policy.
Yes.
And that's their problem.
From London, that was the CEO of QW Capital, Mr. Gianluca Lobefalo. Mr. Lobefalo, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. Now we turn to fans' favourite. With all the eyes remaining and still focusing on the World Cup 2026, it continues across North America. Attention is turning beyond the matches to the systems, the rules and procedures shaping who's able to actually participate in the tournament and who won't be able to. Beyond football, the 2026 World Cup is also raising questions about access, with some players, officials, referees and fans facing travel and entry challenges. Here's a story.
I don't want compensation. I wanted to referee at the World Cup. Those were the words of Somali referee Omar Abdelkader Artan after his World Cup dream ended before he could step onto the pitch. Artan was set to make history. Named Africa's top male referee in 2025, he had been selected for the 2026 FIFA World Cup and was on course to become the first Somali referee to officiate at the tournament. But after arriving in Miami from Istanbul, he was taken for additional screening by U.S. authorities. After hours of questioning, he was denied entry and sent back.
I'm not going to get into why we denied this individual, but there's a reason why this person was denied.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection said Arten was found inadmissible following routine vetting procedures. FIFA later confirmed he would not take part in the tournament, stressing that immigration decisions remain the responsibility of host governments. For Arten, the issue was never about money or compensation. It was about the opportunity he had worked years to reach. And his case is not isolated. As the tournament unfolds across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, several teams and officials have faced visa delays, additional screenings, and travel restrictions. Iran's delegation has been subject to strict travel arrangements, with limited movement windows between matches and mandatory returns to the training base after games. Iraq striker Ayman Hussein has held for hours upon arrival in the United States, while members of other delegations, including Senegal and Uzbekistan, also reported lengthy security checks and travel disruptions. Supporters have faced similar challenges, with some fans reporting visa refusals or revoked travel authorizations despite having tickets and travel plans in place. U.S. officials say these measures are part of a broader security framework. Also, they say visa approvals have been granted to players and staff, while some cases were denied following routine vetting procedures. For FIFA, immigration and entry decisions remain entirely under the jurisdiction of host governments. But as the tournament continues, the situation has raised a broader question beyond the football itself. For some participants, qualifying for the World Cup was only the first step. The next challenge was simply getting there.
Help us understand the wider implications of visa and access challenges at the World Cup. We're joined from Cairo by the International Law and Legal Affairs expert, Councillor Hossein Alem. Councillor Alem, welcome to Q News. Well, first off, hope you're enjoying the tournament, but this case of a World Cup referee being denied entry has drawn a lot of attention. What does it say about the balance between security procedures and sporting access at global tournaments, the biggest really?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. I'd like to start by highlighting and stressing three key points here at the very outset. From an international law perspective, this issue or discussion is not primarily about football. It's about how states balance their sovereign authority over immigration and security with the practical demands of hosting a truly global sporting event. Major international tournaments such as the FIFA World Cup provide a unique illustration of this interaction between state sovereignty, international mobility, sports governance, and the principles of fairness, proportionality, and equal treatment. The ultimate legal question is not whether security measures should exist, but whether they are implemented in a manner that preserves both the integrity of the competition and confidence in the fairness of the process. With that being said, and to answer your question, I do think that when it comes to the question of sovereignty, as I said, and as I clearly mentioned, the international law is very clear in this regard. It clearly enables the hosting state or authority to exercise its power when it comes to the question of who is entitled to be granted an entry visa. But still, this does not mean that states can do this unquestionably. Rather, there are clear parameters and criteria that need to be met in this regard. And that's, of course, when it comes to the principles of proportionality, necessity, and non-discrimination.
Mm-hmm. Well, shouldn't there be some sort of consideration for the nomination of the FIFA as the organizing and responsible body for this tournament? I mean, the reports of the visa delays, additional screening for teams, players, staff and officials, are these common, these issues in mega sporting events like the World Cup? Does it happen often? Does it happen in did it happen in previous World Cups, for instance?
Yes, this is definitely a very important and timely question. As a matter of fact, yes, such incidents do happen when it comes to major international events like that of the World Cup. So it is expected, as a matter of fact, to see this. But let me here also highlight very specific facts. And that's when it comes to visa delays and enhanced screening, they are not uncommon during major international sporting events involving thousands of participants from different parts of the world. And this is why host states routinely conduct immigration, security, and background assessments as part of their sovereign responsibilities. This is why similar challenges have arisen during previous World Cups and Olympic Games. And this is why the legal concern, I would say, is usually not the existence of screening itself, but whether it is administered consistently, efficiently, and without arbitrary discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
Security screening is normal, but legal certainty and equal treatment are where the point of preserving trust
Yes.
in the process lies.
Councillor Alem, now Iran's delegation, along with other teams, has faced strict travel arrangements and movement restrictions, having to stay in one country and go play in another. Now, do these kinds of measures risk affecting the sporting integrity of the competition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. This is a very important question as well, in view of the complexity of the situation and the military conflict between the two countries.
Mm-hmm.
And let me also here, with this regard, be very frank with you that sporting integrity requires that competitors participate under conditions that are as fair as possible and as equitable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
States remain entitled to adopt legitimate security measures, particularly where national security concerns are involved. However, international legal principles increasingly require restrictions to satisfy tests of necessity, proportionality, and non-discrimination or fairness,
Yes.
I would say. So if travel or movement limitations materially affect preparation, recovery, logistics, or performance, concerns regarding competitive fairness may emerge and even become really a concern. And still, security measures should protect the competition and neutrality.
Yes. Well, yes, there's definitely a very thin line between legitimate security concerns and over restriction in an event of this scale from Cairo. That was the international law and legal affairs expert, Councillor Hossein Alem. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. That brings us to the end of our economic bulletin for today. Stay tuned to Q News for the latest from the worlds of business, finance and global affairs. And don't forget to follow our coverage during the World Cup. We'll go beyond the action on the pitch to explore the business side of the tournament, from sponsorships and investments to tourism, trade and the economic impact of the world's biggest sporting event. I'm Henny Saif. Thanks for watching.